Hey there folks, and welcome to the second video for Chapter 35, Behavioral Adaptations to the Environment. Let's get into it. In this section, we're going to talk about learning. This is where behaviors get really interesting. Learning is acquiring new information and changing behavior because of some kind of stimulus in the environment. The simplest form of learning is called habituation. Some of you may be habituated to sitting in class first thing in the morning. Maybe you don't wake up so much anymore and you start to sleep through lecture. And you thought we didn't see you. In the animal kingdom, habituation may look a little bit like this. At one point, that plastic owl was actually effective, maybe, at keeping other birds away. But because the owl stays there, and it never changes, the birds get used to the stimulus of the owl being there until ultimately the plastic owl just doesn't matter anymore. Kind of like the first shot of coffee, right? I drink tea, but I know what you're going through. A much more complex form of learning is called imprinting. Imprinting occurs in very, very young animals of certain types, where their brain fixes on a particular behavioral model or even an image model that for them to use later on in life. Typically, imprinting occurs during a specific part of very early life called the sensitive period. A well-understood example of this in biology is when songbirds that learn their songs instead of being hatching out of the shell, instead of being born knowing them, those birds that learn their songs can only learn songs during their sensitive period. They store all the songs that they hear during that period, and those are the songs that they'll sing as adults. Chicks of the same species that end up hatching and being raised in a lab where they don't hear other birds, they can't sing those songs. It's got to happen during that period. Where this animal behavior, where imprinting starts intersecting with humans, is in conservation programs. See, there are specific species where if they imprint on a human, they'll perceive that human as its parent, and it may lead them to try and be near humans later on. And let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, where wildlife is concerned, some humans are fine for them to be around. We're safe. We're geeks. Some humans are not such good company for a lot of our wildlife. Birds are famously a problem for this. They imprint young, and they imprint on their parents. It's what leads ducklings to follow their mama. It's also what will lead this baby California condor chick to accidentally perceive that scientist they're feeding it to think it's its mother. Instead, conservation biologists use long glove puppets so that the only face that baby will ever see will be that of a California condor. And later on in life, when eventually that chick has grown up and is big enough and strong enough to be released into the wild, it'll know how to recognize its own species. We have some other simpler behaviors that grow into something more complex as well. In behavior, kinesis is a random movement because of a stimulus. Sometimes it's just a startle response. There's a noise and the animal moves, but randomly. Taxis is more complicated. Taxis is the term for when an animal specifically moves toward the stimulus, not random. A great example of this is the way a lot of nocturnal insects, and especially moths, are attracted to light, as you can see all over this moth setup. That is taxis toward the light that all of these moths and butterflies and dragonflies are exhibiting. If you take this one step further, you can breach into something called spatial learning, which is when insects, well, not just insects, animals, store knowledge about major geographical landscape marks in their surrounding area, and learn to map out the location of specific places with specific resources. A famous classic example of this that you may have heard of before is the waggle dance done by bees to communicate information about local resources and the status of that bee's health back to the hive. Want to take it one step further, though? How about hundreds of thousands of miles further? Migration is a specific behavior having to do with where an animal reproduces and where it spends its winter. Some animals have a shorter migration than others. However, this is the Arctic tern, and this little bird has the most impressive, most exhausting, longest migration of any animal on the planet, bar none. Not even whales go further than this bird will, and they do this every year. Imagine how exhausted you'd be. That's from one pole of our planet clear down to the other. But they know, through spatial learning taken to a far greater extent, where decent places are to rest along the way, where you can get fuel stop and food in between long bouts of flying. Now, they have other systems in place. They're sensitive to the Earth's magnetic field, and that helps them keep their direction straight. But you still need to know where to stop for a little while. We also have a few other types of learning. Associative learning is more complex still. Associative learning is when an animal learns that two particular aspects of its environment occur together. They're associated together, such as associating a particular type of tree with fruit that is safe to eat, or trial and error learning, which is when that behavior that they exhibit changes over time as they continue to interact with the stimulus, something in the environment. Like, is that fruit ripe? No, not yet. But that one is. And gradually figuring out what is the key to determine which is the ripe fruit that is good to eat. Probably has something to do with color and smell, maybe how soft, long before you ever put that in your mouth, which is important when some fruit aren't just bitter, but they can be poisonous when they're unripe. Social learning is another type of learning where animals can learn from each other in a social setting by interacting with each other and with the stimulus. And their behavior slowly changes as they watch other animals and interact with them. Here's an example that combines all three. In Africa, the vervet monkey has a series of vocalizations that warn other monkeys in their troop, in their family group, that there's a predator around and they need to be wary. Not just any predator, though. They have 3 different types of warning vocalizations that are specific to what kind of predator they're being threatened by. Something like a leopard or a cheetah has a very specific reaction. If the predator's on the ground, they'll climb up into the trees. If the predator is a hawk or an eagle, they'll hide on the ground under the trees where the bird can't get to them. If it's a venomous snake, they'll stand up so that they can see the snake coming in the grass and get away, or even fight it off. Young vervet monkeys have to learn which call is appropriate to which kind of threat and which specific reaction is appropriate to that predator. They need to learn to associate specific calls with their predators and that call with that predator's specific reaction. They learn how to give those calls themselves through trial and error. You'll hear young vervet monkeys giving the wrong predator call all the time as they are learning which one is actually appropriate for the hawk versus the snake. But they also exhibit social learning by watching the adults and their older siblings in the troop and figuring out, okay, they made that noise for that predator and then we do this. And over time, it's the combination of all 3 types of learning that let them achieve a much richer, more complex behavior and a better form of communication. That's not just where we're ending, though. That's freaking fantastic. Let me show you something I really love. cognition is defined as the process a brain or central nervous system goes through in order to collect information, store it, integrate it, and then use it to assess new situations. So it's basically everything your brain does right now to take everything it's getting from your senses and use all that information to learn and tell you about your surroundings. A fantastic example of this is in problem solving. Now, we're humans. We are the problem solvers extraordinaire, but we're not the only ones. You may think that birds are normally pretty stupid. We have the phrase bird brain for a reason. And yeah, we know that there are some awfully intelligent parrots. The African gray is famous for this. But they're not the only ones either to buck this particular trend. Ravens, crows, and their relatives are called corvids. And they're not half that bad at problem solving either. Watch this.
All right, can I stay in here?
Absolutely, you can sit and watch.
Right.
And we'll see what happens.
Come on then, send in your mastermind because it's going to need that.
Alex studies wild birds, which he releases after 3 months of research. This one is nicknamed 007, and it's about to attempt what Alex believes is one of the most complex tests of the animal mind ever constructed. The bird is familiar with the individual objects, but this is the first time he's seen them arranged like this. 8 separate stages that must be completed in a specific order if the puzzle is to be solved. And if the bird succeeds, it'll be a world first. He takes time to have a look and then starts with the short stick. He finds it's too short to reach the food. He then sets off to get the first stone. But he drops it. And another. He seems to be stuck. But then, something seems to click. He deploys the first stone. And then another. Got it.
Check that out.
The 8th and final stage. Success. 8 individual stages of one complex puzzle completed. That was remarkable. I've never ever seen anything like it. Of all of the bird behaviour that I've seen, nothing matches that. I can hardly believe it. I'm still just running that sequence through my mind. It happened really quickly. But the immediate question is, of course, how on earth did that crow do that?
This, by the way, is why I adore animal behavior. Go back, watch that again. It's one of my favorite video examples of bird behavior. Remember, that's a bird who's never seen this particular test before, never seen this puzzle before, that only took a little bit less than 3 minutes to solve all 8 steps. Oh, I love this stuff. Okay, I'm going to see you folks in the next video. Go back and enjoy that. Bye, folks.